Reading 8: Managing Individual Investor Portfolios. Situational profiling seeks to anticipate investors' concerns and risk tolerance by specifying investors' source of wealth, measure or adequacy of relationship to needs and stage of life. Psychological profiling addresses human behavior patterns and personality characteristics and their effect on investment choices. It's particularly important in assessing risk tolerance. Underlying behavioral patterns often play an important role in setting individual risk tolerance and return objectives. Based on their responses to a questionnaire, individual investors may be classified into descriptive personality types such as cautious, methodical, spontaneous, and individualist. Using the results of situational and psychological profiling and the financial information gathered in the interviewing process, an advisor can formulate an investment policy statement. Carefully formatted IPS serves as the keystone of the relationship between the investor and the investment advisor. The process of creating an IPS mirrors the process of portfolio management. The policy statement reconciles investment goals with the realities of risk tolerance and investment constraints, resulting in operational guidelines for portfolio construction and a mutually agreed upon basis for portfolio monitoring and review. By necessity, the investor and advisor must discuss the construction of an IPS in a linear fashion. In practice, the process is dynamic, similar to solving simultaneously for multiple variables. The return objective for an investment portfolio must ultimately be made consistent with the investor's risk tolerance and the portfolio's ability to generate returns. The traditional division of return requirement between income and growth objectives may seem intuitive, but these terms blur the distinction between the return goals and risk tolerance. The total return approach seeks to identify a portfolio return that will meet the investor's objectives without exceeding the portfolio risk tolerance or violating its investment constraints. Risk tolerance reflects both an investor's ability and willingness to accept risk. Ability to accept risk is probabilistic assessment of its investment portfolio's ability to withstand negative investment outcomes and still meet the investor's objectives. Willingness to accept risk is more subjective assessment of the investor's propensity for risk-taking. Because many individuals are unfamiliar with the quantitative terminology of risk tolerance, the investment advisor may use psychological or situational profiling to anticipate client attitudes towards risk. Investment constraints typically include the following: liquidity, time horizon, taxes, legal, regulatory, unique constraints. Liquidity. They may be categorized as ongoing expenses, emergency reserves, negative liquidity events. Liquidity is the ease and price certainty with which assets need to be converted to cash. Time horizon. Investors' time horizon constraints also his ability to accept risk. Shorter investment horizons allow less time to make up portfolio losses. Taxes. The basic principles of tax deferral, avoidance, reduction underlie all tax-driven portfolio strategies, but individual solutions are highly country-specific and client-specific. Legal and regulatory environment. Investment portfolio's legal and regulatory environment is ultimately country and client-specific. A basic knowledge of English and American trust law is often valuable. Unique circumstances. The IPS should capture all unique investment considerations affecting the portfolio. Unique circumstances might include guidelines for social investing, trading restrictions, and privacy concerns. As a general rule, only certain asset allocations will be consistent with the client's return objectives, risk tolerance, and investment constraints. The advisor can use a process of elimination to arrive at an appropriate long-term strategic allocation. For individual investors, investment decisions, including asset allocations, are made on an after-tax basis. This is a key distinction and a contrast to tax-exempt institutions. Monte Carlo simulation has certain advantages over deterministic approaches. It's more accurately portrays risk-return trade-offs and can illustrate the trade-offs between attainment of short-term and long-term goals. It provides a more realistic modeling of taxes, and is better suited to assessing multi-period effects.